In the 1300s, the night was not just a time to rest. It was a battlefield, a place where the living and the unseen clashed in a fight for peace of mind. People believed that the darkness that enveloped the earth at night wasn't merely the absence of light, but a presence, a force that could bring harm. The very air seemed thick with tension, and every creak of a floorboard or rustle of fabric could be a signal that something unseen was near. Nightmares were not considered the product of the imagination, but rather the work of evil forces. The night, with its cold, silent shadows, was seen as a time when demons and spirits roam freely. These creatures of the dark were said to enter through the cracks and crevices of the world, seeking to cause harm to the sleeping soul. It was believed that the mind was vulnerable in sleep, and thus people armed themselves with the tools of faith and superstition. The church, the candles, the whispered prayers, all were defenses against the evils that lurked in the dark. Crosses were placed on the bedpost or under the pillow as a reminder that the divine would protect them during their vulnerable hours. The battle was not always visible to the eye. It was fought in the silence of the night, in the small rituals that gave people comfort and protection. For in the absence of light, it was faith that provided the brightest glow, the shield against the forces of darkness. In the 1300s, superstition was not just a belief, it was a way of life. The unknown was a powerful force, one that could not be explained or controlled, and therefore it was feared. People understood that the world around them was filled with mysteries, and in the dark of night, those mysteries became dangerous. The unknown was not simply what could not be seen, it was what could not be understood. Every shadow was a potential threat, every sound in the night a possible omen. People believed that evil spirits, demons, and even witches had the power to enter their homes through cracks in the walls or the very air. The night, then, was seen as a battlefield where unseen forces fought to invade the sanctuary of the home and the soul. Superstition was born out of this fear. Everyday rituals were often designed to ward off these unknown threats. It was common to place items of spiritual protection, like holy water, crosses, or relics, around the home. The belief was that these items, blessed by the church, held the power to keep evil at bay. One of the most widespread superstitions involved the use of candles. People would light candles in their homes as a way of creating a barrier between themselves and the darkness outside. The flame, small as it was seen as a symbol of divine light. It would not only illuminate the surroundings but also provide spiritual protection. People believed that lighting a candle before bed would keep away nightmares, demons, and spirits that roamed the night. And then there were the whispers. People often whispered prayers or recited psalms before sleep, believing that these sacred words would shield them from the evil forces that could invade their dreams. The act of whispering was seen as more intimate, a way to communicate directly with the divine in a quiet, personal way. In the absence of modern science, superstition was the only explanation for the things that went bump in the night. The fear of the unknown drove people to seek comfort in rituals, objects, and beliefs that gave them a sense of control over their world and their dreams. In the 1300s, the cross was not just a symbol of faith, it was a powerful spiritual weapon. People believed that the cross held the key to protection, especially during the vulnerable hours of the night. In a world filled with unseen dangers and supernatural threats, The cross was their shield, their connection to the divine. When the darkness of the night crept in, people placed crosses at the head of their beds or under their pillows, believing that the sacred symbol would guard them while they slept. The simple act of having a cross nearby was thought to provide a protective barrier against evil spirits and demons. The cross was more than a piece of wood or metal. It was a divine artifact, blessed by the church and imbued with the power to ward off the malevolent forces that were believed to roam the night. In a time when the supernatural was deeply intertwined with daily life, the cross served as a tangible reminder of God's protection. It was said that even the smallest cross could banish nightmares. People would carry tiny crosses with them or hang them around their homes to ensure their safety. The belief in the cross's power was not just rooted in Christianity, but in the universal understanding that light, in whatever form it took, could drive away the darkness. In moments of fear, when nightmares crept into their dreams, people would clutch their crosses tightly, whispering prayers for safety. The cross, both a physical and spiritual presence, became a source of comfort and strength. It was the light in the darkness, a reminder that, despite the terrifying unknown, they were not alone. Candles were not just a source of light in the 1300s. They were symbols of hope, spiritual protection, and a vital tool in the battle against the darkness of the night. In a world where nightfall meant not only the end of the day, but the arrival of evil spirits, a candle was seen as a beacon, a light that could push back the darkness and protect the soul from nightmares. It was believed that light had a divine power, that it could not only illuminate the room, but also purify it. People would light candles by their bedsides before sleep, believing that the soft glow would shield them from the malevolent forces that roam the night. The flame was not just a physical light, it was a spiritual force that connected them to the divine, offering a sense of security in an uncertain world. Candles were also a symbol of the presence of God. As they flickered in the darkness, they reminded people that no matter how deep the night, the light of the divine was always near. The act of lighting a candle before bed was not just a practical measure, but a ritual, one that reinforced their faith and protected them from the unseen terrors of the dark. In medieval homes, candles were often placed at the head of the bed or near windows, acting as a barrier between the sleeper and the outside world. The light would not only protect against physical threats, but it was also believed to ward off nightmares, evil spirits and demons that could enter through the cracks in a night. The ritual of lighting a candle before bed was not just a superstition, it was an act of faith, an offering to the divine for protection during sleep. It was a quiet declaration that, though darkness surrounded them, they were not alone. In the 1300s, whispers held power. The act of speaking softly in the quiet of the night was not merely a form of communication. It was a direct connection to the divine. People believed that whispered prayers, said with the utmost reverence and in the stillness of the dark, had the power to ward off evil spirits and protect the soul from the terrors of the night. Before bed, it was common for people to kneel beside their beds and whisper prayers, asking for divine protection during their sleep. The darkness, though feared, was not something to be avoided. Rather, it was something to be embraced with faith. People understood that the night was filled with dangers, not just physical threats, but spiritual ones. And so they called upon God, saints, and angels to guard them as they slept. The prayers were simple but powerful. They were not recited aloud, but murmured softly into the night, often accompanied by gestures such as crossing oneself or making the sign of the cross over the bed. This act of silent communication with the divine was meant to invoke protection and peace, to calm the mind and spirit before sleep. It was believed that these whispered prayers created a spiritual barrier, an invisible shield that could protect the soul from nightmares, demons, and malevolent spirits. The very act of whispering made the prayer more intimate, more personal, a way to speak directly to the divine in a quiet and sacred space. Whispered prayers were not just a means of asking for protection, they were also a way of expressing trust. By whispering into the night, people were acknowledging their vulnerability, but also placing their trust in the divine to watch over them, to guide them through the darkness of their dreams. The 1300s were a time of deep faith, where the church was not only the center of spiritual life, but also the guardian of the community's safety, especially when it came to protecting people from the unknown dangers of the night. In an era when superstition and fear of the supernatural were widespread, the church offered a sense of security. People turned to it for guidance, protection, and the promise of divine intervention against the malevolent forces that they believed prowled the dark hours. Priests and clergy were seen as the spiritual warriors of their communities, tasked with protecting the souls of the living from the dangers of the night. In the hours before bed, many families would gather for a final prayer or blessing, seeking the church's protection before they went to sleep. This might include the sprinkling of holy water, the making of the sign of the cross, or the chanting of prayers meant to shield them from evil spirits. One of the church's most powerful tools in the fight against nightmares was the blessing of holy objects. Crucifixes, rosaries, and religious relics were often blessed by priests and placed in homes to offer protection. The belief was that these objects, imbued with divine power, could drive away demons and evil spirits that might invade a person's dreams. In addition to these physical protections, the church also offered a spiritual service. The comforting presence of a priest, reciting prayers or performing exorcisms, was seen as an antidote to the fear that plagued people's nights. The rituals of the church were not just about defending against external threats, but also about giving the people peace of mind. The church became the ultimate protector, offering not just religious rituals, but also a sense of calm in a world filled with unknowns. In a time when the night was feared, the church stood as a beacon of light, offering spiritual safety and a sense of divine security. In the 1300s, dreams were seen as messages from the divine, and nightmares were no exception. People believed that every dream held significance, whether it was a vision of angels or a terrifying encounter with demons. Nightmares, though frightening, were not merely random images of the mind. They were believed to be divine messages, warnings, or tests of faith. To understand these dreams, people turned to the church, to saints, and to religious texts. Priests would interpret dreams, offering guidance and wisdom on what the dream might mean. If a person had a particularly troubling nightmare, it was often seen as a sign that they were under spiritual attack or that their faith was being tested. In such cases, the church would step in with rituals to protect the dreamer and offer them spiritual strength. Nightmares were sometimes interpreted as omens. If a person dreamed of being attacked by demons or monsters, it was thought to be a warning that evil was approaching. But not all nightmares were seen as negative. Some were thought to be a way for the soul to confront its deepest fears and weaknesses. In these cases, people believed that the nightmare was a divine challenge, a way for God to purify their spirit. The idea of divine intervention in dreams was deeply tied to the medieval understanding of the spiritual world. The belief was that dreams were a way for the soul to communicate with God, and that nightmares were not just random occurrences, but important lessons or warnings that needed to be understood. For those who struggled with recurring nightmares, the answer was often prayer, meditation, or seeking the counsel of the church. A dream that repeatedly haunted someone was viewed as an invitation to strengthen one's faith and face the spiritual challenges ahead. In this way, nightmares were not just feared, they were opportunities for growth. For people in the 1300s, sleep was not merely a time for rest, it was a sacred space, a period of spiritual recovery where the soul could be restored, renewed, and protected. In a world filled with threats, both seen and unseen, sleep was the moment when the body and mind could finally release their burdens. But this time of rest was not passive. It was an active form of spiritual healing, a time when faith and ritual played key roles in ensuring the safety and peace of the sleeper. The process of going to sleep was often accompanied by protective rituals. People would often kneel beside their beds, whispering prayers for protection before they laid down to sleep. They would recite verses from the Bible, asking for divine intervention to guard them from nightmares, demons, and any malevolent forces that might invade their dreams. Sleep in this sense was a form of surrender. It was a way for people to trust in the divine, to place their faith in the protection of God and the angels. By seeking divine guidance and support before sleep, they were acknowledging their vulnerability and asking for strength. They believed that, through prayer and spiritual preparation, they could enter a restful state where their soul would be shielded from harm. In the stillness of sleep, people were believed to undergo a form of spiritual purification. Nightmares and restless sleep were seen as signs of spiritual imbalance, as if the soul had been tainted or disturbed by evil forces. Sleep, then, became not just a time for physical rest, but for the spiritual healing of the soul. It was a time for the soul to find peace and protection from the dangers of the night. The church, with its blessings and rituals, played a central role in this process. Priests would often perform blessings or exorcisms to ensure that a person's sleep was free from evil. In this way, sleep was seen as an act of faith and spiritual renewal, a vital part of life that allowed the individual to face the challenges of the coming day. In the 1300s, sleep was seen as more than just rest. It was a vital component of spiritual recovery. The physical body may have rested, but it was the soul that needed healing. People believed that the day's worries, fears, and sins could weigh heavily on the soul, and it was only in sleep that the soul could find respite, renewal, and protection. Sleep was considered a time when the soul could regain its strength, cleanse itself of the trials of the day, and prepare for the challenges ahead. The act of resting was not just about physical rejuvenation, but about spiritual purification. It was a chance to confront the fears of the night and find peace before the morning light. As they lay down to sleep, people would often recite prayers or make the sign of the cross, inviting divine protection and guidance. The church taught that during sleep, the soul could be vulnerable to attacks from evil spirits or demonic forces. So sleep became a time of both physical rest and spiritual fortification. Through rituals, prayers, and blessings, people sought to ensure that their souls were shielded from harm while they rested. The belief in sleep as a form of spiritual recovery extended beyond simply asking for protection. It was also about finding peace within oneself. By entrusting their souls to God's care during the night, people believed they could wake up spiritually renewed and ready to face the new day with strength and faith. In this way, sleep was not merely a passive act of resting, it was an active process of spiritual healing and renewal. It was a time for the soul to find peace, comfort, and safety in the divine embrace. Looking back at how people in the 1300s fought off nightmares and protected their sleep, it's clear that their methods were deeply tied to their beliefs, faith, and the limited understanding of the world around them. They didn't have the science or psychology we rely on today to explain the nature of dreams or the causes of fear, but what they did have was a profound connection to their spirituality, their community, and the rituals that gave them comfort in the face of the unknown. The practices they followed, the use of crosses, candles, and whispered prayers, were not just about physical protection, but also about creating a space where the mind and soul could find peace. In a world filled with superstition and constant threats, these rituals were a source of security, a way to mentally prepare for the vulnerability of sleep. The divine presence of God and the Church were seen as the ultimate protection against both spiritual and physical dangers. One of the most powerful lessons we can learn from these ancient practices is the importance of ritual in calming the mind and creating a sense of safety. While we may no longer rely on crosses or candles to protect us from nightmares, the underlying principle remains the same. Rituals can provide a sense of order and security in a world that often feels chaotic or frightening. Whether it's through meditation, prayer, or simply creating a peaceful bedtime routine, these practices allow us to approach sleep not as an enemy, but as a sanctuary. Additionally, the belief in divine protection reflects a deeper truth that fear, while natural, can often be soothed by faith and trust. Whether we call it faith in a higher power, belief in ourselves, or trust in the people around us, the act of surrendering our fears can help us find rest. In a world full of uncertainties, the act of trusting, whether it be in God, in science, or in personal resilience, can help alleviate the anxiety that prevents us from fully embracing sleep. Finally, the rituals of the past remind us of the power of community and shared belief. The people of the 1300s didn't face their fears alone. They had the support of their families, the guidance of their spiritual leaders, and the collective power of their shared faith. In today's world, we too find strength and connection in our relationships, in our communities, and in the collective rituals we maintain. Whether it's through a group meditation session, a family dinner, or simply sharing our struggles with others, community support can be a vital tool in overcoming fear and anxiety.